Hello everyone and welcome to Yoka's Boka. I am Yoka, your night owl. So for today we will be doing a craft project out of clay. For this project I will be using this wooden plaque that I got from the dollar store. If you don't have this then that's okay, you can skip this. You will also be needing some clay. I will be using this leftover Sculpey clay from a different project. The one that I'm using requires you to bake it, however I'm sure any other clay will do just fine. We will also be using some tools to help us sculpt this project. Since Father's Day is around the corner, I wanted to come up with a cute gift idea, and you can make this for yourself, your friend, or just about anyone. I feel like Rilakkuma is pretty universal and it's not just for girls. Anyways, you can also customize some of the accessories to fit your taste, which I will show you later in this video. Before doing anything, I like to cut my clay into small pieces. This will help with the proportions, especially with the head and the body. So using my cutting board, I measured out some clay for Rilakkuma's head and put it aside. I then did the same thing for his body, and once that was done, I cut the rest of the clay into smaller pieces. These don't have to be measured perfectly. By the way, that stuff on my cutting board is some wax paper that I cut and taped onto. This helps prevent any clay sticking to it and it keeps it clean. We will start with Rilakkuma's head. Taking a piece of clay that we put aside for his head, we are going to start rolling it gently into our hands. When the clay is warm enough, it will help us mold any shape we want easily. To make his head, we need to make it a bit of an oval. So using the insides of our palms, gently put pressure and start making the clay into an oval shape. Be careful not to press too hard because his head still needs to be plump and not flat. Really take your time with this. Speaking of time, be sure to take the time to like and subscribe to my channel, especially if you are a night owl. And if you have Instagram, be sure to follow me at Yoka's Boka. Make sure to periodically check that the head is the right shape and not too flat. You should have something like this. Now put it aside and we will work on the body. Taking the biggest piece of clay that we cut earlier, we are going to start doing the same thing. Take the clay and warm it up in your hands. Then start making one end of the clay narrow. The wider part of the clay is going to act as Rilakkuma's torso, while the narrow part of the clay will be his legs. To achieve this shape, roll the clay back and forth in your hands and apply slight pressure on one side of the clay. You can also flatten it just a bit. Also, if there are any impurities in the clay, like cat hair, now is the time to take it out. After a while, you should have something like this. You can also take this time to double check if you like how it is looking so far. If you are happy, we can move on to the next part. Taking a tool that is not too sharp, we can start creating Rilakkuma's legs. Press your tool into the clay and start making a line. This doesn't have to be a deep line, but enough to make an impression. If there are any clay bits, you can use your finger to pat it down and make it smooth again. Don't forget to create this line to the back of the body as well. Now we can work on the chest. For this, take a bit of clay. Start rolling it in your hands and make a log shape. Then taking something flat, we can press on the clay, but don't press too hard or it will be too hard to pick up the clay. You should have a flattened oval. If it is too big, like with mine, then you can take some clay away and restart the process until you have something that is just right. Once the chest is complete, we can start attaching the head to the body. Make sure to play around with the positioning of the head before going straight into it. To attach the head, I will scoop some clay out of the body to create a little divot. Then you can place the head comfortably into the body. Press it lightly so it can attach. By the way, anytime you are attaching parts, it is good practice to constantly check your work and smooth anything out that is out of place. You might not notice it, but you could have dinged the clay or made a part lopsided by pressing too hard. The scariest bits are done, and we can focus on the little parts. Taking a bit of clay, we are going to make a log shape again. This is going to be Rilakkuma's arms. Once you have your log shape, press it down just gently, just to make sure that it's not so round. And then we can go ahead and attach it to the body. Taking a tiny bit of clay, I'm going to round it out and then press it down. This is going to create a little circle. Then we can place it on top of the arm. That's going to act as Rilakkuma's paw. For his other arm, I made it slightly longer by using a tad bit more clay. I then did the same thing and created a log, then pressed it down slightly. It looked like it needed a bit more, so I went ahead and added just a tad bit more clay again and then redid the whole thing. I was much happier with how this arm came out, so I attached it by gently pressing it to his head and body. For this arm, we don't need to create a paw since he is holding his head with it, and you wouldn't even be able to see it. We can now move on to his ears and mouth. Start taking 3 pieces of clay and rolling them into balls. Once you have 3 balls, choose the one that is the smallest and flatten it. You should have a small circle that will be Rilakkuma's mouth. If it's too big, then take away some clay and do the whole process again. Once you attach the mouth, we can move on to the next ball of clay. Make sure it's nice and round and that it matches the other ball of clay. We want them to resemble each other as much as possible, so take your time on this part. Once you are satisfied, you can then attach it to the head. I put mine a bit far from each other, but you could have them close together. I've seen Rilakkuma with ears that are close to each other and far apart, so it's up to you, it's how you like it. We can now make the details for his ears. To do that, make a tiny ball of clay and cut it in half. Then make them both round again and flatten them. You should have 2 tiny circles. And whoops, my ear accidentally fell off, but it's okay. I just had to press on it a bit firmly. Okay, now taking the small circle, put it right on top of the ear and press it gently to make sure it sticks. Then do the same with the other ear. Our Rilakkuma body is complete. However, before we move on, we need to make sure that our Rilakkuma has a flat surface, so when we attach it to our wooden plaque or whatever you're using, it will be easier. To do this, push down the sculpture very, and I mean very lightly. Applying light force will make the side of the sculpture flat, and it will be easier to attach later on. For this next part, you are going to need a toothpick. You can either measure or eyeball how tall you want the toothpick to be. I just roughly estimated how tall I wanted mine to be and took little bits of it off at a time. Also, it's easier to just break the toothpick than trying to cut it with scissors. That did not work at all. Since I will be making 2 accessories for my Rilakkuma, I needed 2 toothpicks. So depending on how many accessories you are planning for him to hold, you will need to measure more toothpicks. Once I was happy with the length of my toothpick, I began to press the toothpick straight into his arm. You don't have to go too deep, but just enough where you think that his arm can support your accessory. If it's going to be a heavier accessory, then I suggest making your toothpick longer and pressing it deeper. Your arm should look something like this. After all that, we can finally bake this piece at 275 degrees for 20 minutes. Just to be safe, I always recommend reading your clay packaging, as each clay is different and some might not even require you to bake your clay at all. In the meantime, we can start with the accessories. I've seen these adorable clay flowers everywhere online, and so I'm going to make one. To make one, we are going to need 6 pieces of clay and make sure they are rounded. I then chose the biggest piece out of all of them and made that the middle of the flower. Then all you do is press the other pieces around the middle until you have a flower. Super cute and super easy. I made sure to give the flower a light squeeze just so the clay was secured. Then taking one of the toothpicks we measured out earlier, decide where you want to place the pick. I chose to place it right in between the petals. Now this is ready to be baked as well. Once again at 275 degrees for 15 minutes. We can now move on to the base. I will be using white acrylic paint to cover the wood. If you're not using a base, you can just skip this part. Once the paint was dry, I painted the other side as well and let that dry. I felt like it would be fun to add some origami in this, so why not some lucky stars? My best friend and I would make these all the time, and I still remember how to make them from middle school. Sheesh! To start, you will need some strips of paper. I used some colorful origami paper since origami paper is easy to use when making these stars. Just note, if you use thicker paper, it might be harder. The way I make my lucky stars is by making a pentagon shape. Don't press the paper too hard and keep it kind of loose. Then start wrapping the strip of paper around. It should kind of guide you where to wrap the paper if the shape is right. When you're near the end, just tuck that piece of paper under. You could also cut any strip of paper poking out. Now pinch the tips and a star is born. This might take a few tries, so be sure to have a lot of paper. And if it's not puffing up, then it's possible you are wrapping too hard. So try making it looser until you get it. Once you have your army of stars, we can move on to the next accessory. We will also be using paper for this part, so choose any paper you want to use. I wanted to make a flag that Rilakkuma could hold, so I folded the paper into a triangle shape and then I cut it out. I had to cut off a little bit of the paper to make it perfect, but you should have something like this. You can make this flag as big or as small as you want. For mine, I decided to have it smaller, so I cut it down. Then taking that second toothpick that we measured earlier, I folded the paper over it just to make sure that I was happy with it. Once you are happy with the flag, grab a glue stick and apply a layer of glue. Then wrap it around the toothpick and press it hard to make sure that the flag will stick to the toothpick. It should look something like this. The best part about this flag is you can write your own custom message. If your pieces are done baking and have completely cooled off, we can begin painting them. For this, we need paint, and I will be using some acrylic paint. For Rilakkuma, I mixed some brown and yellow to get that shade of brown. I painted him a total of 3 times. Between each layer, I made sure to let the paint dry before putting another layer. As for the flower, I painted the middle yellow, and I made sure to paint the petals white too. I know it seems weird to paint something that is white with white paint, but it's something that my teachers drilled into us during art class, and I can't seem to forget it. I then painted the toothpick green to make it look more like a stem, and Yumi was trying so hard to smell my work. She eventually gave up and I was able to finish the stem. Okay, this is probably the hardest part, at least for me. I lightly drew in where I wanted Rilakkuma's eyes and mouth to be with the pencil. Then with a tiny brush, I slowly went in with black paint to color in the eyes. However, when it came to his mouth, I couldn't handle the pressure and I had to turn off the camera. Sorry for not showing you the mouth, but the paint job is finally done. With the scary part done, we can now move on to Mod Podge, my favorite. You don't have to seal your work, however, I like to because it makes all the pieces look very nice, and it feels good. So taking a clean brush, I added a thin layer of Mod Podge all over my pieces and set it aside to dry. After all that hard work, it's finally time to assemble. Take all the pieces that you created and have them all ready to go. Before doing anything, play around with your Rilakkuma figure and the stars to see how you would like to position everything. Once you have a general idea, grab a hot glue gun and put a generous amount of glue on the Rilakkuma figurine and place it on your base. If you have stronger glue, I suggest using that, but hot glue gun gets the job done. Now we can move on to the lucky stars. I placed the yellow star right underneath Rilakkuma to make it look like he was leaning on it. Then I placed the other stars all around him in a circle. I didn't like the placement of one of the stars, so I carefully removed it and re-glued it. Thankfully, the hot glue was forgiving. And we are finally done! I do hope you enjoyed this project, and if you did, consider liking and subscribing, and I will see you all a little later.
Mm-hmm.